Now, it's Red Eye Radio. Talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios. For Gary McNamara and Eric Harley, Dan Mandis, this is Red Eye Radio.
866-90-RED-EYE is the phone number, 866-907-3039. Dan Mandis here. I should say 907-3339. Dan Mandis here, and I am in for Gary and Eric. They return next Sunday night, Monday morning, and there's a lot going on. Kamala Harris continues to try to call out Donald Trump. We are going to get into that audio. She is, of course, talking about reparations, and not a big surprise because she is trying to get the support of the black community. We'll talk about that and a whole lot more right here on Red Eye Radio. Donald Trump. By the way, you can find out more about me on the Dan Mandis Show Facebook page. Do me a favor, follow me on X as well. Donald Trump did an interview with Bloomberg, and I thought this was a great interview. Some people are saying that this interview was an absolute train wreck. Other people, though, saying that it was a great interview. We're going to play some audio. I'm going to play some audio. I think this was Donald Trump at his absolute finest. However, some folks will disagree. He was talking about tariffs, among other things. One of the things, though, that I will say right off the bat is that Kamala Harris could not have done this interview. That is always going to be, at least for me, as we move through this election cycle and move through these campaigns, that Kamala Harris, even though she's out there saying Donald Trump is trying to hide, the reality is that he is out there. He is doing interviews. And again, not to belabor the point, but I will, he is doing interviews that Kamala Harris could not do, like this interview with Bloomberg. Part of being a presidential candidate is being able to, what's the best way to put this? Being able to defend your policies. And it is becoming so very clear that Kamala Harris simply can't. So this was a really contentious interview with Bloomberg, the editor-in-chief, a guy by the name of John Micklethwaite, and clearly he disagrees with Donald Trump on tariffs. Now, President Trump, as you know, wants tariffs on goods coming into our country. Micklethwaite thinks that is a bad idea. So I'm going to play you some of this audio because I think that it is great audio, and it is a great example of how Donald Trump is able to defend his policies.
We're going to bring the companies back. We're going to lower taxes still further for companies that are going to make their product in the USA. We're going to protect those companies with strong tariffs because I'm a believer in tariffs. I'm not sure that you are. I don't think you are, but I congratulate you on your career. But to me, the most beautiful word in the dictionary is tariff, and it's my favorite word. It needs.
Yeah, this was a very meaty interview. It was a very substantive interview that I don't believe, again, that Kamala Harris could actually pull off. I just don't. She doesn't have the chops or the confidence like Donald Trump does, because this interview with Bloomberg, really meaty, really detailed, and it evolved and devolved pretty quickly as they argued about tariffs.
You're also talking about 20% tariffs on the rest of the world. That is going to have a serious effect on the overall economy. And yes, you're going to find some people who will gain from individual tariffs. The overall effect could be massive.
I agree it's going to have a massive effect, positive effect. It's going to be a positive, not a negative.
Well,
let me just I know how committed you are to this, and it must be hard for you to spend 25 years talking about tariffs as being negative and then have somebody explain to you that you're totally wrong. It'll have a negative.
I mean, that's the way that this interview went. So this guy, Micklethwaite, his argument is that you have Trump's plan for imposing tariffs on goods made outside of America and lowering the taxes for companies that make their products here in America. Now, Donald Trump's argument is that by keeping those jobs here, we keep people employed and expand the tax base here in America. Now, the editor-in-chief of Bloomberg, Micklethwaite, he won't let Donald Trump speak. It's one of those interviews where Trump is trying to explain his policies, and they keep talking over each other. And it continued on, this argument.
I'll go a step further.
40
if
million,
you don't
40
do
million,
this,
President
this
Trump,
country
40
has
million,
no
40
chance.
million jobs is a lot of jobs to rely on
They're
trade.
all coming back.
Those are
You've
40 million
lost.
jobs. Those are 40 million jobs in America that rely on
Are
trade.
you ready? John Deere, great company. They announced about a year ago they're going to build big plants outside of the United States, right? They're going to build them in Mexico.
And you threatened
They're
them with
also going
tariffs
to build.
and they stopped.
That's right. I said, if John Deere builds those plants and not selling anything into the United States, they just announced yesterday they're probably not going to build the plants, okay? I kept the jobs here.
So this interviewer is just aghast. He can't believe that Donald Trump doesn't see that his stance on tariffs is the right one. Trump, again, believes in heavy tariffs. And part of what's going on, and we can argue about whether or not tariffs are good ideas, bad ideas. Here's the thing, though, that Donald Trump is doing. He's running for president. And y'all know how when the former president, he talks about 3D chess matches, right? And so where everybody else is playing checkers and he's playing chess and all that kind of stuff. And so part of what's going on as President Trump is running for president and doing these interviews is that he's really setting this up so that if he is elected and when he is elected president, he can begin negotiating with China and Europe and whoever else. This really is Donald Trump setting up the chessboard. That's what he's doing. He's setting up the chessboard. I don't know if he really intends to impose as heavy of tariffs as he's talking about. But what he wants to do is scare the living crap out of China, out of Europe, out of these other nations who have been importing cars and goods into our country, and as Donald Trump sees it, taking advantage of our country. And so what the president wants to do, the former president wants to do, is even the playing field. Now, some economists are worried that Trump's plans would have a negative impact on the economy and add trillions of dollars to the national debt, because when you have heavy tariffs and then the tariffs eventually, if these goods do come into our country, then those costs will eventually be passed on to the consumer. There's many different sides to whether or not tariffs are a good idea or a bad idea. Now, for Donald Trump, he thinks it's a great idea. Obviously, there's some economists that think it is a bad idea. One of the things Trump talked about big time is that he does want substantial tariffs on imports and also on U.S. companies that outsource manufacturing. So if you're a U.S. company and you're having some of your widgets made in, I don't know, China or South Korea or whatever it is, well, he wants to penalize those companies for not having those widgets made here in America.
You said, President Trump, at the moment there is a thing called the Trump trade in the markets. Do you know what that is? The Trump trade is very simple. People are betting that your policies are going to drive up debt, they're going to drive up inflation, so they're going to drive up interest rates. Are the investors wrong?
Yeah, I had 4 years no inflation. I had 4 years no inflation.
But that was when you had much...
I had 4 years. It's better than that. And Biden went 2 years with no inflation because he inherited from me. And then they started spending money like drunken sailors. They spent so much money. It was so ridiculous, the money they were spending.
Yeah, and that spending, of course, put us into rampant inflation that we saw. And it continues today with higher grocery prices. Yes, I know that inflation has gone down, but we are still contending with higher grocery prices. Now, there's a clear disagreement here. You have Donald Trump, who made his living in business, building businesses, building buildings, and doing whatever he needed to do to continue to expand his business and employ people. He also presided over 4 years of economic prosperity, minus, of course, COVID. But he did spend a lot of money. But the bottom line is, for you and I, for Americans, our economy was pretty good under Donald Trump. And so I don't know when they're arguing about tariffs. I mean, it is clear that Donald Trump does favor tariffs. He's implemented them in the past. But here's what I remember, is that when Donald Trump was running the first time, you had people saying that we would all be plunged into economic peril, darkness, and depression, and they were really wrong. I mean, do you remember that? Do you remember when Donald Trump was running? And it was like you had all these people saying that Donald Trump was going to destroy the economy. And they were wrong. Now, Trump's argument is that the more the tariffs, the more the companies will end up coming back to America. Of course, expanding the tax base here as well. If companies do decide to build it in America, then you have more people working and, again, expanding that tax base, among other things. So really the question is, how do you pay for no taxes on tips and no taxes on car loans, which are both things that Donald Trump has talked about? How does that get paid for? Trump, of course, says with the tariffs. There has been some criticism to that idea.
People like the Wall Street Journal, who's hardly a communist organization,
yeah, but you don't know.
They have criticized you on this as well. You are running up enormous debts.
What does the Wall Street Journal know? I'm meeting with them tomorrow. What does the Wall Street Journal know? They've been wrong about everything. So have you, by the way. You've been wrong about
You're trying to turn this. You're trying to turn this.
You've been wrong about it.
No, you're trying to turn this into debate. There are
It's
business
not a debate.
people. There
no,
are
but
business
you're wrong.
people.
You've been wrong all your life on this stuff. You've been. Let me tell you about currency. You're going jumping a lot of.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things and again, this was a very contentious interview because it was clear that this guy, the interviewer, Thistlethwaite or something like that, I can't remember what his name is. It's up here, but he's no fan of Donald Trump. He's no fan of what Trump wants to do. It's John Micklethwaite. And so they're talking about a lot of these very broad concepts about the economy and what various economists and, think tanks are saying about what Trump wants to do with tariffs. And to be honest with you, I don't know what the ultimate decision will be made if Donald Trump runs for president again, or wins the presidency. What I do believe is that he is setting the table for negotiations. It's all about the art of the deal, folks. And he knows that Europe, he knows that China, he knows that these various countries, they're watching and they're listening. And they understand that if Donald Trump is elected, they're going to have to deal with him and negotiate with him on tariffs. And so he's got to talk tough. And I think that's what he's doing. Now, one thing that I've always read is how Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have presided over a far better economy than Donald Trump. That is a thing that a lot of the media likes to report. They like to talk about. They talk about GDP. They talk about job growth, the cost of health insurance, how many people have insurance and wages and all of these different data points. And a lot of this is what I would say how you use the statistics and the data. But the thing is this, when you talk about all of these data points, is that you can manipulate data and you can manipulate statistics to frame the economy to benefit whoever candidate you're for. I mean, if you're for Donald Trump, you can frame the economy in a certain way so that you can present it like he had the best economy. If you're for Kamala Harris, then you can frame the economy in a way to benefit her and her narrative. But here's what I know. Put all of this other stuff aside, the talk about tariffs and who has the better economy, who had the better economy and so forth. Joe Biden had really high gas prices and really high grocery prices, and we all remember inflation at 9.3%. We also, by the way, have massive credit card debt as a result. That is the reality that we all lived with. And so while you've got Donald Trump arguing with the editor-in-chief of Bloomberg about tariffs, the reality is that when it comes right down to performance, Donald Trump, more people had more money in their pocket with Donald Trump than with Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. That's just a fact, folks. That is just a fact. And so sometimes they get into these, highfalutin egghead kind of arguments about, the economy and again, the GDP and statistics and data. One economist says this, other economists say the other thing. What I know is that under Joe Biden, I had a lot less money in my pocket because everything was more expensive. And for me, that's the bottom line. 866-90-RED-EYE, 866-907-3339. Dan Mandis here in for Gary and Eric. This is Red Eye Radio.
This report is brought to you by Shell Rotella. With advanced synthetic technology, is designed to help keep your rig running with more mileage and less maintenance. As the seasons change, so does truck maintenance. Cold weather can affect everything from your batteries and air brake system to tire inflation and fuel lines. Here's a maintenance tip to help make sure your rig is ready when winter comes knocking. Have your batteries tested by a certified technician. Dead batteries are one of the most common causes of winter breakdowns. Testing them now will indicate whether or not they can keep up with electrical demands of your truck this winter. When you have your batteries tested, check the alternator for sufficient amperage and voltage output as well. Find a professional technician near you to have your batteries and alternator tested today, so you'll be ready when the seasons change.
Lines open for your calls. 866-90-RED-EYE on Red Eye Radio.
Red Eye Radio, 866-90-RED-EYE, 866-907-3339. Dan Mandis here in for Gary and Eric. This Bloomberg editor-in-chief, John Micklethwaite. This is a guy, as I've been playing audio from the Donald Trump interview with him today. Trump is all over the place. That's one of the things that I'm going to talk about tonight, is that you've got Trump doing these interviews, and he's also out on the campaign trail. There are people within the Democrat Party. They are really upset. They're really angry because they think that Kamala Harris is just kind of coasting. They're saying, why isn't she working so hard? You've got Donald Trump, who went from this interview with Micklethwaite, and I think I'm saying his name right, Bloomberg editor-in-chief, whatever. But he goes from this to, I think he's was in Georgia last night doing an event there. So he is just all over the place. I mean, he's in, you name the battleground state, he has probably been in that state in the last week or two. And Kamala Harris just isn't. Today she did an interview with Charlamagne, and of course she's out there. One of the questions, of course, that was asked was about, wait for it, I know you'll be shocked, reparations. Now, coming up in the next half hour, I'm going to play you the audio of what she had to say about reparations. I think that Charlamagne kind of let her off easy. I know, again, that you'll be shocked by that. Because one of the things that she said, and again, I'll play the audio, but, one of the things that she said was, well, reparations definitely needs to be studied. Do you know what that is? When a politician says reparations, or anything, frankly, needs to be studied, it basically means that it's not going to happen. I mean, look at what happened with Gavin Newsom. Gavin Newsom was out there in California. He ordered a study. He had a whole big committee on reparations. And then it totally backfired because they came back. And I don't remember what the exact amount was, but in California, they came out, wanted to have a big study, big committee on reparations, and they came back and they said, oh, yeah, black folks should be getting, I forget what it was, but it was some extreme, crazy, obnoxious amount. It was totally unrealistic, and people lost their ever-loving minds again.
Red Eye Radio. from the Uniden America Studios. Now, for Gary McNamara and Eric Harley, here is Dan Mandis.
It's Red Eye Radio, 866-90 Red Eye is the phone number. Your call's always welcome, 866-907-3339. In for Gary and Eric. They return next Sunday night, Monday morning. By the way, I do host a radio show in Nashville, Tennessee on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. It is the morning show, 6 to 10 Eastern Time. We broadcast not only, of course, on the radio, but also on all of the various streaming apps. And also, you can see the radio show, if you so choose, on Facebook and also YouTube, Instagram, and all of the other social media sites as well. So the big interview with Bret Baier and Kamala Harris, this should be interesting. Now, Bret Baier, of course, he says there's not going to be any negotiations, if you will, as it relates to questions. He's not going to give in at all. He's going to ask, he says, exactly what he wants to ask. And I've got more on that coming up here in the show. But going to be a big interview. Hopefully we'll see if he is tough on her. He should. Probably a lot tougher than Charlamagne was today. And I've got audio from that coming up as well. But you've got Kamala Harris. She's down in the polls. She's losing momentum. Some in her own party are questioning not only her abilities, but also it seems like her work ethic. Now, again, Donald Trump shows big-time momentum. He's got wind in his sails, and he's gone to every conceivable state. He's given every conceivable interview, not just friendly interviews, as we just heard in the previous segment. Now, things are getting nasty, of course, and they have been between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, as you can imagine. Ian Sams is with the Harris campaign, and astonishingly, he and others in the Kamala camp, they are questioning Donald Trump's mental fitness.
I want to ask you about something you posted on social media that is related to this. You posted a side-eye emoji in response to Trump dropping out of a planned interview with CNBC, alluding again to Trump's mental fitness. Now, the vice president was invited to appear with them but declined. She also declined to be at that Bloomberg conversation, or to have a conversation with Bloomberg, I should say. She also declined an interview with Time Magazine. Declining media hits really isn't an indicator of mental fitness, is it?
Well, I think anybody who thinks that the vice president's dodging tough questions should tune in tomorrow when she sits down with Fox News for an interview. And so I think she's out there taking questions even from really tough corners. Today, his appearance at Bloomberg was the first event he has done in one entire month with a mainstream media outlet. Everything else has been in conservative media or friendly spaces.
It is so interesting because, number one, I don't necessarily know if that's true because Donald Trump has done so many different interviews with so many different outlets. I don't feel the need all the time to fact check the Democrats because I believe that majority of people know that, especially here in a political campaign, that they're prone to lie. I mean, they do that. But here's the thing. It is a strange flex, isn't it? Isn't that a strange accusation? Suddenly, they're out there saying Donald Trump is weak and unstable. And that seems to be a really strange tactic, especially considering the fact that they've been silent on Joe Biden for the last 3.5 years. This is, of course, Kamala Harris. You've heard this before.
And here's the thing. It makes you wonder. Why does his staff want him to hide away? One must question.
By the way, she's got her chin in her hand, like the pondering emoji. It doesn't take much pondering to realize that Kamala Harris is way off base on this one, and good Lord, is she shrill.
One must question, are they afraid that people will see that he is too weak and unstable to lead America? Is that what's going on?
No, actually, Kamala Harris, no, that's not what's going on. I don't know if that's sexist or not, but there is something to be said for appropriate use of your voice. And when you're out on the campaign trail, realize that the things that you do and the things that you say and the way that they say them, the way that you say them, they are going to be shared. They're going to go viral. And that particular clip It went viral for a number of reasons. Number one, for the ridiculous accusation that Trump is weak and unstable. Clearly, he is not weak and unstable. The dude, as I mentioned the other night, he got shot. He took a bullet for America. He was tackled by 4 or 5 Secret Service agents. Then he got up. He wanted to finish his speech. Yeah, he's so weak. He's so unstable. But the other reason why that went viral is just because of the really cringy way in which she was speaking. Because she does, I'm sorry, but she does. She sounds shrill. It's like she's intentionally being provocative. She's intentionally being nasty to Donald Trump, saying things that she knows is not true. And when she talks about weak and unstable, that is the personification of the administration that she's been serving in for the last almost 4 years. Do you know the entire, if you look at the Biden administration, it is weak and unstable personified. I mean, if you want to talk about weakness and you want to talk about why the Biden administration is personified as weakness, is seen as weak, it's because weak sanctions against Vladimir Putin. Let's just go down the line. Weak sanctions against Vladimir Putin. Now, those weak sanctions emboldened Vladimir Putin, basically gave Vladimir Putin permission to go into Ukraine. And now, here we are, $175 billion later, still involved in a forever war. And that weakness, what did it do? Well, it basically gave China permission to do what they did, or what they're threatening to do, which is go into Taiwan. Of course, we know that Iran funding more terrorism, funding the Houthis, funding Hamas, funding Hezbollah. That weakness by Joe Biden, that lack of stability, has cost America dearly, and it has cost the world dearly as well. So when shrill Kamala is out there screaming as she's doing the whole pondering face, why it is that Donald Trump is weak and unstable, come on. And you know what they're doing, right? What they're doing is they're trying to bait Donald Trump into doing another debate because she is so far behind in the polling. Now, I know that the polling that you see and the polling that I see, which I'm not really paying much attention to, but that polling shows that they are either neck and neck, or Trump is, slowly starting to take the lead as she loses momentum. And so now she's desperate. And now she's appearing on Fox News because she's desperate. She's may be appearing on Joe Rogan because she's desperate. And let me tell you something. If you think that Kamala Harris, do you know anything about Joe Rogan? His interviews are like 3 hours long. 3 hours long with, I don't even know if they do any real commercials. But there's no way that she could survive an interview with Joe Rogan. Charlamagne is no Joe Rogan. And by the way, I do know that it does sound cliche at this point to say, but Kamala Harris calling Donald Trump weak and unstable while she stood by and watched in silence as Joe Biden began to deteriorate, she said nothing. As a matter of fact, she sat there and lied to the American people, saying that Joe Biden, behind the scenes, he was really sharp, when it was obvious to everyone that he wasn't. So you really don't have to say much here regarding Donald Trump, because it's obvious from his actions, it's obvious from the things that he says and what he is doing that he is not weak and unstable. Joe Biden's weakness and the fact that he is unstable, as I said, has cost the world dearly. Would you like to talk about the weakness on the southern border? That also cost America big time. So, listen, talk show hosts, Gary, Eric, me, talk show hosts across the country, a lot of people have talked about the weakness and the unstable nature of the Biden administration. and the worldwide ramifications of that. But part of this is that this is a new line of attack going after Donald Trump. And for me, I think this is clearly a sign that they know that she is losing, and she's losing big time.
His staff won't let him do a 60 Minutes interview. Every president for the last half century has done one, anyone who's running for president. Everyone has done it, except Donald Trump. He will not debate me again. I put out my medical records. He won't put out his medical records. And you have to ask, why is his staff doing that? And it may be because they think he's just not ready and unfit and unstable and should not have that level of transparency for the American people. There's a real choice in this election.
Wow. So Kamala Harris is saying that Donald Trump is, and I'm going to air quote here, not ready. She does know that he's already done the job, and he did it really well, right? So there's a lot of new things that Kamala Harris is bringing to the table, this line of attack and these line of attacks. And I think that when political candidates, when they come in 3 weeks before the election with new attack lines, new attack points, you know what that is, right? They realize that they're losing and the usual talking points are not working. So then they have to bring in new talking points to try to reach the American people. Now, one of the big questions that political folks are asking, why isn't Kamala Harris working hard? Political experts question Kamala Harris's closing strategy. This was from Breitbart. Vice President Kamala Harris's quiet schedule on Tuesday, raising concerns among political experts who questioned her apparent lack of urgency with less than 3 weeks until Election Day. Harris has repeatedly said she is running as an underdog, but her schedule does not appear to mirror those claims. Harris's Tuesday schedule shows one event where she sat down for an interview with Charlamagne at 5 o'clock Eastern. Now, she didn't do much today except for that one interview with Charlamagne 3 weeks out. How is that even possible? Trump will do an interview and then he'll go off to at least one other battleground state. At least that. It seems like Donald Trump has been hitting just about every town in every battleground state and a ton of interviews as well, especially here in the final stretch. Polling shows that Kamala Harris is losing support among men, black voters, and Hispanic voters as well, while former President Donald Trump is running ahead of his 2020 and 2016 performances. Swing state polling indicates Donald Trump is either leading Harris or within the margin of error. Voter registrations and early voting also appear to benefit Donald Trump in many states. Now, yesterday, she was speaking to Charlamagne. One guy, one interview. That's all she did. Now, one pollster, I think this guy's name is Rick Ruffini. He posted on X, Kamala needs all day to prepare for Charlamagne with a question mark. I mean, that's a good question. That's a great question. You need all day to prepare for one interview. Others saying this, why isn't she in 3 battleground states a day? Why isn't she in 4 media markets in Pennsylvania today rather than 1? Political analyst Mark Halperin said on the morning meeting, if you assume that she is behind, which, again, I think she is right now, Halperin says, not by a lot, but she is behind, why isn't she working hard? And that's a very big question. I'm going to play one quick soundbite for you. This is Kamala Harris. She was asked about reparations from Charlamagne.
Yes, I am running to be a president for all Americans. That being said, I do have clear eyes about the disparities that exist and the context in which they exist, meaning history, to your point. So my agenda, well, first of all, on the point of reparations, it has to be studied. There's no question about that.
How many times has reparations been studied? It's been a lot.
And I've been very clear about that position. In terms of my immediate plan, I will tell you a few of the following. One,
and we'll get to that coming up next on Red Eye Radio.
Get in touch with Red Eye Radio, toll free at 866-90 Red Eye.
866-90 Red Eye is the phone number, 866-907-3339. Dan Mandis here in for Gary and Eric. I host a talk show in Nashville, Tennessee, Super Talk 99.7 WTN. I am the morning host. You can hear that show 6 to 10 Eastern. You can find us on all the socials and at 997WTN.com. All right, coming up, the hard-hitting interview with Charlamagne and Kamala Harris. It's a kind of interview, to be perfectly candid, that you would expect from Charlamagne and Kamala Harris. Details straight ahead on Red Eye Radio.
Top of the hour news is brought to you by House Products. Visit houseproducts.com.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One. Now, it's Red Eye Radio. Talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios. For Gary McNamara and Eric Harley, Dan Mandis, this is Red Eye Radio.
866-90 Red Eye is the phone number, 866-907-3339. In for Gary and Eric this week. Always appreciate the opportunity to fill in on the mighty Red Eye Radio. By the way, you can always follow me on X. I wish you would, at Dan Mandis Show. I've got the soundbite, I would say, of at least the day with Kamala Harris as she was out on the campaign trail.
We just need to move past the failed policies that we have proven don't work.
I'm Donald Trump, and I approve this message. That was Kamala out on the campaign trail. You know, it is interesting because they keep doing this. They keep talking about how we need to, move past the failed policies of the past. And, they've had the last 3 years. They've had the last 3.5 years. Now, there's a few things that are out there that I want to play for you. The vice president, she did an interview with Charlamagne. I'm not going to call him Charlamagne the God. Sorry, I just can't. But I do want to play this interview, some of the clips that are out there. And I'm just going to be honest with you. It was an interview among friends. That's what it was. Charlamagne and Kamala, they go way back. And so there really, at least to me, there wasn't a whole lot of substance to it. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. But the question of reparations did come up.
Yes, I am running to be a president for all Americans. That being said, I do have clear eyes about the disparities that exist and the context in which they exist, meaning history, to your point. So my agenda, well, first of all, on the point of reparations, it has to be studied. There's no question about that.
So here's my question. Because every politician, when they're black and they're asked this question, typically, if they're Democrat, they go down the road of, oh, yeah, it needs to be studied. Needs to be studied. We need a commission. We need a committee. Got to study it. I mean, any Democrat will use that line. It's got to be studied, and it's always studied. And please understand, I'm not for reparations. But what I am saying is that that's a cop-out. Quit pandering, because that's all we have heard from Kamala Harris since she began running for president is just a bunch of pandering. Yesterday, we went through her plan, I'm putting that in air quotes, her plan for black Americans. I think it's the last couple of days we've been talking about that. And so now the question about reparations, and she says, well, it needs to be studied. Well, if I'm Charlamagne, I would look her dead in the eye and I would say it's been studied. It's been studied in California. It's been studied in other states as well. As president of the United States, you need to make a decision as to whether or not you are for or against reparations. Because the conversation about how it needs to be studied, friends, that is an absolute cop-out. That is an absolute cop-out. Remember what happened in California. I mentioned this earlier. In California, Gavin Newsom, he says, yeah, let's have a committee. Let's have a commission on reparations. Let's go ahead and study it. And they studied it, and that committee came back with some harebrained number that the folks in California should get. And it was like crazy. I'll have to look it up, but it was insane. And then it was like, never mind. And that made people even madder. And so for Kamala Harris and for Charlamagne, I'm assuming he let her get away with this answer. I haven't heard the entire interview, but for her to just say, well, it needs to be studied. Again, I'm not for reparations, but that is a cop-out. If I'm Charlamagne, I would say, well, what about an executive order? Really try to pin her down so that people know what they're voting for.
So my agenda, well, first of all, on the point of reparations, it has to be studied. There's no question about that. And I've been very clear about that position. In terms of my immediate plan, I will tell you a few of the following. One, as it relates to the economy, which is a lot of what you have addressed. Look, I grew up in the middle class.
Oh, my God, she did not do that. She did not go down the road of, I grew up in a, middle class. The lawns were nice. People took pride in their lawns. Does she not have another answer? Does Kamala Harris not answer to the failing economy under the Biden administration, the Biden-Harris administration, and the 9.3% interest, I should say, inflation rate that we had during the Biden-Harris administration? When you talk about, and I'm not going to go through all of this again, but when you talk about the economy, and I'm air quoting that, you're talking about the GDP, and you're talking about all of these things that are just sort of egghead economists will talk about the economy, but the price of stuff is still too high. That's the whole point. And she doesn't have an answer for that. What she's going to do is she's going to talk about how she grew up in the middle class, and she's going to have the same silly speech that she has given time and time and time again.
You have addressed. Look, I grew up in the middle class. My mother, worked hard, raised me and my sister, and by the time I was in high school, she was able to afford our first.
All right, so there you go. Kamala Harris, and that is part of what she wants to say about the economy. She also, of course, talked about her opportunity economy and all of that. And at least for me, so far, I'm not hearing much, if anything, different from Kamala Harris in this interview with Charlamagne. The phone number is 866-90-RUD. I do have more Charlamagne audio coming up, because one of the things that he did ask her is, don't you guys in the Biden administration, don't you bear some responsibility to the catastrophe on the southern border? That story, that audio straight ahead. Roy is in Dallas. He called 866-90-RUD. Hello, Roy. Thanks for calling in.
Good morning, Dan. I appreciate you covering that part regarding President Trump's initiative to try to bring China under control, as well as some other countries. For a number of years, I worked for Neiman Marcus in the import department. And there are rules and regulations which are approved and passed through Congress governing the amount of goods that can be imported into the United States. We had quotas, and under the schedule, which is the tariff schedule of the United States Customs Code, which regulated many goods of any sort that were purchased and bought into the United States. The tariffs also include quota forms, which covered to protect our industries in the United States, which we have lost. We had quota forms to regulate the amount of shoes manufactured for men and women that could be imported into the United States. If those quotas got filled up, then U.S. Customs would close it. But then they started loosening up those controls. Look what we had. How many U.S. shoe manufacturers do we have left in the United States? Not very many. And this covered textiles. Look how our textile industry in the United States have been evaporated and gone. The tariffs, they would make sure that American businesses and American jobs would stay here in the United States.
Well, and
Trump
part
is
of the
very smart.
Well, he is worried.
Yes,
Let me just throw this in. So, and I'm no expert on tariffs. I'm no expert on imports and all of this. But one of the things that a lot of folks will tell you is that, okay, so if we have American businesses that are competing with slave labor in China, it's a little difficult to compete with that slave labor. So if I'm an American businessman and I'm looking to have some widgets made, do I have them made in, Murfreesboro, Tennessee, or do I go to China and I've got slave labor and I've got, limited regulations and I can make those widgets a lot less? So what Trump is trying to do, part of what Trump is trying to do is even the playing field. That's number one. Number two, the Democrats are all about the environment, yet they're hand-wringing that Donald Trump wants to bring manufacturing back to America. Well, here's the thing. The Chinese, if you want to talk about, I just mentioned the regulations. The Chinese don't have a heck of a lot of regulations when it comes to the environment. And when they're mass producing things, they could give two craps about the environment. And so the Democrats, on the one hand, they say, oh, well, we've got to protect the environment. We've got to protect the environment. But on the other hand, they want to give a lot of the manufacturing power and a lot of the economic power to China, a country that is helping to destroy the environment, if you believe that that is going on. So
Dan,
there's a lot of contradiction going on.
Yeah, Dan, the other thing, too, is in dealing in the import end, we would have to go through banks for purchasing foreign currency and letters of credit. Now, these banks, they highly profit off it. Like, look at your capital investment companies, like, and your brokers, like Goldman Sachs and Deutsche Bank and J.P. Morgan Chase.
Yeah.
They garnish and they also influence the rules and regulations inside Washington, D.C., as well as, China goes around the rules. They are deceitful. And, like, for example, the electric car industry they're building factories down there in China, and they're going to say, well, those cars are manufactured in Mexico. They're not manufactured in China, and we're going to bring them here in the United States. It's going to hurt the U.S. automobile industry.
Yeah, well, don't forget, Roy, I appreciate the call. Also, don't forget, one of the other things that China is doing is China is building car manufacturing plants in Mexico and then bringing them across our border as well. So, I mean, you're right. There's a lot of ways that China is getting away with things. And Donald Trump, it's his stance, it's his position that we need to manufacture more here in America. Now, let me tell you something. There's a lot of really smart people that will tell you that it is a world economy. And so when you start messing with these imports, when you start saying to China and Germany and all of these other countries that you have to pay a really high tariff, then that is going to, some will say, raise the prices of goods that are imported into our country. Donald Trump says that the higher the tariff, then what that's going to do is that is going to force those companies to start manufacturing goods, building goods here in America. That will strengthen our own tax base. There's a ton of different ways to look at the positives and the negatives of tariffs. What I know is that the same people that are saying that Donald Trump's idea of really heavy-handed tariffs of imports coming into this country, the same people that are saying that that is a crazy idea and that Donald Trump is going to destroy the economy are the same people that said that Donald Trump would destroy the economy in 2016 when he was running for president. So to me, here's what I do know. As I said in a previous hour, what I know is that Donald Trump, when he was the president, I had a lot more money in my pocket, and my dollar, my paycheck, was worth a lot more, and things were a lot less expensive. That's what I know. I'm not an economist. I don't play one on the radio, but I've been around long enough to be able to read when you have some people that have absolute Donald Trump derangement syndrome. They hate Donald Trump for whatever reason, and so that impacts their analysis. There's a lot more on this. By the way, Charlamagne did ask about the responsibility of the Biden-Harris administration on the southern border, and I've got that audio for you coming up next on Red Eye Radio.
Brought to you by FPPF, Fuel Power Max.
It's a common road rumor that it's impossible for one-truck owner-operators and even carriers with just 2 or 3 trucks to get freight direct from the source, the shipper. Yet, hard-won experience from untold numbers of owner-operators with authority disproves the notion. Search your home base area and, later, frequent freight destinations to find all the manufacturers, distributors, and other shippers in the area. Once you get that list, ask yourself if those companies know who you are and what you do. If not, you're leaving opportunities on the table. Strive to own your backyard, to build a solid foundation for the business. For many a small fleet, it's the loads outbound from home that are the bread and butter. But you can take that same approach to the destination area, identifying shippers there and getting on the phone to make sure they know who you are and what you do. Owner-Operator Business 101 is provided by Overdrive's Partners in Business program. Go to overdriveonline.com to the Partners in Business section of the website for more detail on this and many other topics.
Brought to you by Shell Rotella. With advanced synthetic technology is designed to help keep your rig running with more mileage and less maintenance.
Lines open for your calls. 866-90-RED-EYE on Red Eye Radio.
#866-90-RED-EYE is the phone number, 866-907-3339. My name is Dan Mandis, in for Gary and Eric. Follow me on X at Dan Mandis Show. Got some more audio, just very quickly, from Kamala Harris's interview with Charlamagne. And to be honest with you, there's not a lot here. There's not a lot of substance, but I'm going to play a couple of audio bites for you. Number one is they talk about how Donald Trump is a fascist.
You have 2 choices, or you don't vote. But you have 2 choices if you do. And it's 2 very different visions for our nation. One mind that is about taking us forward and progress and investing in the American people, investing in their ambitions, dealing with their challenges. And the other, Donald Trump, is about taking us backward.
The other is about fascism. Why can't we just say it?
Yes, we can say that.
You know, well, you can say it. It's just not factually correct. You know, when you demonize Donald Trump by calling him a fascist, of course, what you're trying to do is they're trying to call Donald Trump Hitler. That's what they're trying to do. And the reality is that, at least to me, that is an incredibly anti-Semitic statement. Because when you compare Donald Trump to Hitler, what you're doing is you're sanitizing what Hitler did. When the reality is that Donald Trump is one of the most pro-Israel presidents we've ever had. And so not only is it historically incorrect, but it's just a ridiculous statement to make. But you see, here's the thing, is that when that is the level of the substance of the dialogue, of the so-called interview, then, as I said, you're not going to get a lot of substance out of that interview when that is the attitude of the interviewer and of the interviewee.
Why do you allow them to call you the border czar when that's not even that wasn't your role?
I'm not giving him permission for that.
Oh, you're right. But I mean, you don't push back on it because that wasn't your role.
Fact checkers have made that clear. Look, if I responded to every name he called me, I wouldn't be focused on the things that actually help the American people, and that's my focus.
So what's weird, though, is that when the media called her the border czar, and she was called the border czar for many years, the fact checkers and the media didn't seem to have any kind of a problem with it. It was only when you pointed out that the border was a complete and absolute mess that everybody realized, oh, no, the Republicans can use the term border czar against Kamala Harris because the border was an absolute mess under Kamala Harris. Now, the conversation regarding the border and illegal immigration, it did come up yesterday during this conversation between Kamala Harris and Charlamagne.
But doesn't the Biden administration have to take some blame for the border, though? A lot of the blame? Because
yeah, he did ask. Find out her answer coming up next. Red Eye Radio, 866-90 Red Eye. If you want to call in, 866-907-3339.
Red Eye Radio from the Uniden America Studios. Now, for Gary McNamara and Eric Harley, here is Dan Mandis.
866-90 Red Eye is the phone number, 866-907-3339. Going to play that audio of Kamala Harris and how she feels about any culpability that the Biden administration has on the border and the issues at the southern border. But first, very quickly, Bret Baier is headed to Pennsylvania. He's getting ready to interview Kamala Harris. This is going to be a big moment for Bret Baier because there's some people that are saying, Marjorie Taylor Greene actually tweeted out that Kamala Harris is using Bret Baier, using Fox News to try to beat Donald Trump. People that are out there are saying that. Personally, I don't believe that that's true, but we'll have to see where the interview goes. But this is something that Bret Baier has released on Twitter.
Hey everybody, it's Bret Baier in Washington, heading to Pennsylvania on Wednesday for a big interview with Vice President Kamala Harris. I have a whole list of questions already, but if you have a question, let me know. On X, on Instagram, on Facebook, at Bret Baier. I'll read over those. Maybe there'll be some that I use from viewers to ask the Vice President some pressing questions about the issues of the day. If you care about something, let me know, but you can bet that economy, immigration, the big topics, will be in this interview. And it will be fair, balanced, and unafraid.
There you go. So that is Bret Baier, and I'm curious as to what the response of that will be. I am going to repost that on my X feed at Dan Mandis Show. If you want to follow me and then let Bret Baier know from there what it is that you want him to ask Kamala Harris. Yeah, Marjorie Taylor Greene, she tweeted this out, talking about Bret Baier. And everybody wants to know. Everybody wants to know, okay, so what is going to happen during this interview? Because the question is, he says that he's going to be unafraid. When you do an interview, and I've done thousands, when you do an interview, the big question is always going to be not in the original question, but it's also going to be in the follow-up. For example, when Charlamagne asked Kamala Harris about immigration and the culpability, the responsibility that Harris and Biden may have in the wide open border and the situation with all of the illegal immigration in our country, she basically says, no, we don't have any culpability.
But doesn't the Biden administration have to take some blame for the border, though? A lot of the blame? Because, I mean, the first 3 years, y'all did get a lot of things wrong with the border.
No, Charlamagne, within hours of being inaugurated, the first bill we passed before we did the Inflation Reduction Act, before we did the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act, before we did the Safer Communities Act to deal with gun violence, first thing we dropped was a bill to fix the broken immigration system.
I like how she says the first bill we dropped, like she's dropping an album. But here's the reality. The reality is on day one, Joe Biden started the process of dismantling everything that Donald Trump did to help mitigate our border problems. Because when Obama was in office and then you have Donald Trump, we had problems with illegal immigration. As you know, Donald Trump, he ran on build the wall, build the wall. And the American people did respond. And so Trump was building a wall. We had Remain in Mexico. We had people that were being deported. We had a border patrol that was doing the job. They were protecting the border. We had the most effective border policy in years under Donald Trump. And so then Joe Biden comes along, and with the stroke of a pen, 94 different executive orders over the last couple of years, last 3.5 years, where he utilized to dismantle everything that Donald Trump did. And that was on day one. I mean, day one, moratorium on deportations. Stop building the wall. Remember that during the primary, Joe Biden said, if you want to claim amnesty, come on in, come on to America. And they sure did. And so the proper follow-up question from Charlamagne should have been, well, what about the executive orders? Stopping the construction of the wall. What about the executive orders stopping the Remain in Mexico policy and all of the other things that Donald Trump had put into place that were working, only for you to dismantle it? And as far as the earlier comment about Charlamagne asking Kamala Harris, why do you let Donald Trump get away with calling you the border czar? You know, it's interesting. Because as she was the border czar, she never seemed to have a problem with being called the border czar when she was serving in that role, in that capacity. Never did. She never corrected CNN. She never corrected MSNBC. She never corrected Lester Holt. She never corrected Kirsten Welker. She never corrected anyone when they referred to her as the border czar. But let's do this, shall we? Let's think about this for a minute. Let's say that, you know, because the term border czar is being used against Kamala Harris. She will tell you my job as the air quoting border czar, or whatever you want to call her, was to tackle the problems with these other countries where we're getting all of these illegal aliens from. You know, it was about the push factors. There's pull factors and there's push factors. What pull factors in America? Why are people coming to America? What's the pull factor? Why is America a magnet for illegal immigration? Well, it's all the benefits that they get. I mean, Biden is allowing them to come in. They get their little CBP One app, and they get shelter, food. They get a place to stay. They get cash cards. Sometimes they get phones. They get all of these things. And it's a much better life than they had in Venezuela or wherever they're coming from. But if her job was to tackle the push factors, why are people leaving these states, these nations? Why are people leaving Honduras? Why are people leaving Venezuela? If that was her job, she was a failure at that. So if you're going to say that her job was not to protect the border, okay, your job was to deal with the push factors. Deal with, work with these other rogue and, I would say, as Donald Trump once famously said, these crap hole nations. Why are people leaving those crap hole nations? That was part of her job as the border czar. Well, that was a complete and utter failure because they still came. So any way you slice it, and that's what I would ask Bret Baier. If I was to tell Bret Baier, if he wants to know what exactly is it that you want me to ask Kamala Harris, what I would say is, why is it you perpetually lie about what you did and Joe Biden did on day one? Because you say that you dropped legislation, as she says, to handle our failing border, our failed border policy here in America. Well, that's not all you did, and she needs to answer for that. So if Bret Baier has the guts to ask her that question, and if he does, and he doesn't need some knucklehead radio talk show host to tell him to ask that question. The question is, do you, in yes or no, this is going to be the question, yes or no, do you and Joe Biden, do you have any culpability in the millions and millions and millions of illegal aliens that have come into this country. And she'll say, no, on day one, we tried to fix it. Brett Baer, follow-up question. Why did you eliminate the Remain in Mexico policy? Why did you stop the deportations? Why did you stop the construction of the border wall? Because that is what led to not only more people coming into this country, but also that was like a welcome mat. It was like come one, come all. And that is exactly what they did. This is Benjamin calling from Orange County. I'm not sure where in Orange County. Is that California, Benjamin?
Yes, sir. How are you? Thanks for
All
taking
right.
the call.
I'm good. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, I just wanted to say not that many people, or if I haven't heard anyone talk about it, but it's in regards to the immigrants getting better treatment or services than the U.S. citizens. And nobody's really talked about it, but even in jail, it's the same way. I don't know if you know this. But
I did not know that. Go ahead.
So if like you're a citizen, right, like of the county, and you go to jail, you'll get some dish rag, white tea, and some nasty get up and this, whatever. I mean, it's jail, right? It's not the most luxurious place, but ICE, all the illegal immigrants separated, and they get all new stuff, and they get separate meals and separate housing. And it's
Do
much
they
better
really?
accommodation. So yeah, so even in jail, nobody ever talks about that. I was like, yo, even in jail, they get better accommodations.
So can I ask Benjamin? Do you know this from firsthand experience?
Mm-hmm. I do.
So when did the other inmates, do they talk about how unfair that is?
Yeah, I mean, everyone always has their woes in there, but just you get the used stuff, and they all get brand new stuff. Every one of them, they all get brand new clothes.
Well, it's kind of funny because when you see these immigrants getting off the bus in Washington D.C. or New York or wherever it is, yeah, they're wearing I don't know what you'd call it, but it's clearly new clothes. And many people have noticed that they're dressing better than a lot of Americans. So yeah, thank you, Benjamin. So they're getting better treatment than our inmates that are from this country, and also from our veterans. And Benjamin, I appreciate the call. I mean, there is no doubt. There's no doubt that these illegal aliens are getting better treatment than our American citizens, especially our veterans. I mean, when you look at the stories, when you hear the stories about how veterans are getting kicked out of, the places that they're staying so that the illegal aliens and the migrants who are flown into this country, they are the ones that are now taking over these, various places where veterans or older folks have been staying and so forth. You see that all the time. You saw that in New York a couple of months ago, as a matter of fact. Now, there's a story out there today. See if I have time to do this. It's let's see if I got enough time to do this. I think I do. So you saw the story. I think I talked about it yesterday, where 30% of the cameras along the border are not working. Now, this audio hit the internet this morning, just kind of a reminder of Alejandro Mayorkas when he was asked about whether or not the cameras were working on our southern border.
Today, I'm asking you, has this technology been operational since you took the post?
I would like to get back to you if there's any deficit in its operational capability. Senator, I'd be pleased to get back to you on that.
Has the system ever gone down under your tenure?
I'd be very pleased to provide you with that subsequent to this hearing.
Yeah. How can you tell how many gotaways you're reporting if you don't know when this technology is working or not working? In other words, how do we know that the 2 million known gotaways is a good number?
Senator, the individuals on the ground in U.S. Customs and Border Protection have visibility of the operational capability of the equipment they use. They oversee counting the number of individuals who evade detection to the best.
But you rely on technology to observe those as well, and you don't know if your technology is working or not working.
Senator, I believe I've answered the question.
Yeah, you did. You don't know if the equipment was working. Now, here's the thing. That was back in April when Mayorkas was asked the question about whether or not the cameras were working. It was back in April. We are now in mid-October, and that same Border Patrol that Alejandro Mayorkas is talking about, they are now saying that 150 out of 500 cameras are not working. And so he was asked the question back in April, and now here we are in October, and we still have 30% of the cameras that are not working. And so you can certainly tell that Alejandro Mayorkas, man, he just jumped right to it. He went back to his office, his cushy office at his cushy gig in Washington, D.C., and he said, hey, are all the cameras working? And somebody must have said no, but he clearly didn't do anything to fix those cameras. There's a lot more. I got it next right here on Red Eye Radio, 866-90-RED-EYE, 866-907-3339.
Get in touch with Red Eye Radio, toll free at 866-90-RED-EYE.
Red Eye Radio, the phone number is 866-90-RED-EYE, 866-907-3339. Dan Mandis here in for Gary and Eric. You know, Oprah Winfrey at the DNC and all of these Democrats, they all talked about joy. Remember that whole thing with Oprah? Joy. Coming up, I'm going to play you some audio that if it doesn't bring you to tears, it's going to be really close, as a woman is talking about her testimony and how there is no joy in her life thanks to Kamala.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One. Now, it's Red Eye Radio. Talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios. For Gary McNamara and Eric Harley, Dan Mandis, this is Red Eye Radio.
866-90-RED-EYE is the phone number, 866-907-3339. I host a morning show in Nashville, Tennessee on Super Talk, 99.7 WTN. Do me a favor, throw the host a bone and follow me on X if you would. Facebook as well, at Dan Mandis Show. If you've seen any polling over the last couple of weeks, you know that Donald Trump has the momentum. I've gone through this exhaustively over the last couple of days. But what I will tell you is there's a reason why. The reason why Donald Trump is doing better, he's got the momentum, and Kamala Harris is losing her momentum, is because people are hearing Kamala Harris speak. People are realizing that she is an empty suit, that she simply cannot defend her policies. She can't defend her shift in policies. And there's just a lot of cringe with Kamala Harris. And so there's a lot to complain about. There's a lot of problems within the Democrat Party. There's a lot of grumbling within the Democrat Party. There's a lot of grumbling in the media. Earlier in the program, I was talking about how there's a lot of grumbling within the MSM, the mainstream media, and the Democrats, and they're complaining because Kamala Harris, she's not hitting the campaign trail like she should. One person actually saying, because she had that interview with Charlamagne yesterday, and one person even saying she had to prepare all day for one interview, one friendly interview with Charlamagne. Why isn't she in Michigan? Why isn't she in Pennsylvania? Why isn't she in Georgia? I mean, people are asking. It's not me. I don't care where she is. But here's the thing, is that the numbers, the same people that have been joyfully talking about the numbers and where she is polling since the DNC, now all of a sudden they're saying, oh, those polls, they're not real. One example is Joy Reid.
And some Democrats are starting to believe the disinformation, too. Have you noticed how sharply the polls have shifted in Trump's favor over the last couple weeks? With these claims that Trump is surging with black and Latino voters and leading in every single swing state, according to secret internal polls, despite all the Hitler talk. Yes, this race will be far too close. Because unfortunately, we do have a fascist groundswell in parts of this country, mainly among white men, let's be clear, but in small pockets among black and brown men, too. This happens to be a global phenomenon as women become more economically independent and seek positions of power.
Wow. Joy Reid. There's some cutting-edge analysis for you. You know what I'm noticing? What I'm noticing is that there are people in the media, people like Joy Reid, people like Joy Behar, two of the joyless women I've ever heard in my life named Joy. And so when they can't explain why it is that Donald Trump is suddenly doing better despite all the Hitler talk, is because, number one, I think that people are becoming wise to the fact that Donald Trump is not like Hitler. Donald Trump and the conservative MAGA movement is not like fascism. Has nothing to do with Nazis or Hitler or anything else. But according to Barack Obama and according to Joy Reid, if you're black or if you're white, I guess they're equal opportunity offenders, then you are somehow fascist. You are somehow a Nazi, and you are following your Nazi leader, Adolf Hitler. And I think that people are beginning to obviously understand that now. I mean, what I'm sure that Joy Reid did not talk about, what she did not address, is the fact that, as I have mentioned many times now, the more people see Kamala Harris, the worse that she's doing. I mean, people are finding out, for example, that CBS, they edited that interview to make her sound more concise and confident. People are figuring out that Kamala Harris, she is cringy, very cringy. And Tim Walz is his own kind of train wreck. But see, the really sad thing about all of this is that as Barack Obama is flying around the country castigating and demonizing black males for supporting Donald Trump and saying that they're sexist and misogynist for not supporting Kamala Harris, there are people out there that are truly suffering. There are people out there that cannot pay their bills. There are people out there that even if they've supported the Democrats all their life, they simply can't do it anymore. Because the last 3.5 to 4 years, it's had an impact. It's had an impact on our pocketbook. It's had an impact on our jobs. It's had an impact on our credit cards because a lot of people had to use credit cards to pay for groceries. But people like Joy Reid and people like Oprah Winfrey and people like Joy Behar and all these Democrats that you saw at the DNC, they can't relate to people like this.
I did not grow up a middle-class child, and I am not a middle-class person right now. When I talk about the struggle, I'm talking about what's real. And I know most of the Democrats, liberals, and leftists are out here just living their best life, so much so that they run up to our comment sections and try to beat us with bootstraps. I did not grow up a middle-class kid. And even though I keep reaching for it and reaching for it, it did not come from my kids either. And I'm still reaching for it, and I'm still reaching for it. I can't seem to grasp it.
This is a woman on Twitter. You can find the video. It's about 3 minutes long on my Twitter feed at Dan Mandis Show. And it is incredibly powerful. And what it does is it addresses a couple of different things. Number one is it does address the economy. And it does address the suffering, the pain and suffering that people are still going through. But the other thing that it addresses is how the Democrats are running around, whether it's on social media or in person, and they are demonizing people who are struggling. And they've been struggling for the 3.5 years that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have been in office. And for this woman, the struggle is real. And the harassment that she's getting is real as well.
And I will make no apologies for feeling like my voice is at least worth something, even if my pockets ain't. Even if I don't own anything, I own this.
Her voice.
And I am going to use it, whether they like it or not. And nobody has to pay me for it. All those people in my comment section, Trump is paying you, white supremacists paying you. I got $15.37 in my bank account right now. And I'm hungry. Nobody is paying me to speak what is real. It is real for me.
And she's suffering. $15.37. And, you know, I can relate. I know a lot of you folks can relate as well. And when you add insult to injury, when you post that you are suffering and you are struggling, and then the people affiliated with Kamala Harris, Barack Obama, Joe Biden, Joy Reid, Joy Behar, and Oprah Winfrey, when they start attacking you simply because you're telling your story and your story is different and contrary to the Kamala Harris narrative that nothing in America is going wrong, everything is great, the economy is fantastic, there's no problem with all of this illegal immigration, and everything is just joyful. And it'll be even better if we vote Kamala Harris into office. Well, I don't know about you, but this woman isn't buying it.
Don't tell me to get an education. I got it. Don't tell me to get a better job. My job is pretty good. I make pretty good money. I cannot afford this rent. I cannot afford to get back and forth and pay for groceries and everything else. I can't. And even though you on the left and everybody else seems to be having parties at Obama's and Diddy's house with Oprah and the rest of the celebrities, a lot of us over here don't have that privilege. I would appreciate it if y'all didn't come and just rub it in. You look poor. I am poor. You need a better job. I need 2 jobs. Either you help or you keep your highfalutin Democrat business to yourself.
No, I'm not hearing a lot of joy out of that woman or a lot of other folks out there. And, you know, much to the dismay of Oprah Winfrey or Joy Reid or Joy Behar and the rest of these true knuckleheads on the left, that woman is absolutely right. I played audio, I think it was on Monday, where there's a montage that I put together. Is a lot of black men, and they were totally calling out Barack Obama. Suddenly, Barack Obama emerges from one of his many homes and his many vacations to demonize men who have probably gone through or are going through exactly what that woman is going through. But the Democrats don't care. The Democrats don't care. You heard Joy Reid talking about fascism, about how, and the Democrats, this is what they do. This is what they do. When you lose on policy, when we've had 3.5 to 4 years of complete epic failure, the only thing that they have left, because they can't run on the policies, as Gary and Eric will tell you every night, then they just call you names. They hurl insults at you. And one of the things that I'm noticing, and I did mention this earlier, where the Democrats are out there and the media is out there trying to sell that the economy, the economy is really good. But I guess the question is, somebody please define what the economy is. Because the egghead economists on TV will talk about stats and they'll talk about the GDP. They'll talk about, all of these data points. And most of the American people, they don't have any idea what that means. To this woman, what she knows is that she's got $15.37 in the bank account. What this woman knows is that she can't afford her rent. What she knows is that she can't afford to go back and forth to the grocery store to buy groceries. That under Joe Biden and Kamala Harris right now are 25% higher than when Donald Trump was in office. And how many of us are still carrying around all that high-interest credit card debt because we had to use those credit cards to pay for our groceries, to pay to keep the lights on, to pay for that set of new tires, to pay for that gasoline, because we didn't have the money. And it's insulting to people like this woman. It's insulting to people like you. It's insulting to people like me who lived through 9.3, 9.4% inflation and growth. It is insulting that they can't defend that, which they can't. And their only defense is that if you support Donald Trump, well, then you must be a fascist. That is the shallowness of the Democrat Party. That is the shallowness of the mainstream media. And that's why I believe that more and more people are beginning to realize just that, the shallowness. They can't defend their policies because they're indefensible. And all of us are the victims of those policies. And so on November 5th, or when early voting happens in your state, in my state, the state of Tennessee, early voting is today. And when I vote for Donald Trump, I'm going to have the voice of that woman in my head as I go into that voting booth. 866-90-RED-I, 866-907-3339. Dan Mandis in for Gary and Eric. This is Red Eye Radio.
Lines open for your calls. 866-90-RED-I on Red Eye Radio.
Eight 866-90-RED-I is the phone number, 866-907-3339. Is this real? So I'm seeing in my Twitter feed, and you can follow me at Dan Mandis Show on X. This may have the opportunity to be one of the biggest trolls ever. This is the story. Donald Trump will be officially working at a McDonald's in Pennsylvania this weekend to prove that he has worked at McDonald's longer than Kamala Harris. I agree with the internet. That is a new level of trolling, if true. Can you imagine Trump going into a McDonald's and working there for like an hour? And then, of course, what he would do is he would buy the entire McDonald's restaurant like food, pay for everybody's food. Donald Trump made fries for everybody. Can you imagine that? But you see, here's the thing. Kamala Harris says, oh, yeah, I worked at McDonald's. Really? How is it possible that she worked at McDonald's for, what is it she says, like in Georgia, 3 months, whatever it was? Not one person who worked with her at McDonald's has come out and said, yeah, I worked with her at McDonald's. Not one person that I've seen. McDonald's itself, the franchise, doesn't have any proof that she worked at McDonald's. In other words, the question is, did she really work at McDonald's? But I love what Trump is apparently going to do. Go work at McDonald's. He's going to do it for a day. Do it for an hour, whatever it is. I love that. I do, because the former president, I think he really does understand what it takes to connect to the American people. And for Donald Trump. And listen, when Donald Trump does stupid stuff, when he says stupid stuff, it drives me absolutely crazy. But when you look at Kamala Harris and you compare the policies, it's really important to know who you're voting for. And it's really important to know that they're telling the truth. And it doesn't seem to me like Donald Trump, he's not lying. Even though the media will tell you over and over again, oh, he told 1,000,000 lies. No, he didn't. You know who tells 1,000,000 lies? Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. I mean, the entire last 3.5 years have been nothing but lies. Now we got this story about the Border Patrol, and the cameras. I'll be able to go into some detail after the break coming up. But we're finding out more and more about what happened on the southern border with 30% of our cameras not working. And Alejandro Mayorkas, I played you the audio earlier. Alejandro Mayorkas, he testified in Congress. He said, I don't know if the cameras are working or not. Competence is a thing. I'm going to say it this way. Competence is a thing. And it is so clear that Alejandro Mayorkas and the entire Biden administration, from Joe Biden to Kamala Harris to Alejandro Mayorkas and Karine Jean-Pierre, they are all clearly incompetent. Competency is a thing. Ask Elon Musk. Ask Donald Trump. Incompetence, all you've got to do is point to the Biden administration.
Red Eye Radio from the Uniden America Studios. Now, for Gary McNamara and Eric Harley, here is Dan Mandis.
Appreciate you listening. The phone number is 866-90-RED-EYE, 866-907-3339. I host a radio talk show in Nashville, Tennessee on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. I'm the morning host of Nashville's Morning News. You can find out more about me. Follow me, if you would, on Facebook and also especially on X. I post a lot there. And again, both at Dan Mandis Show. So the other day, I think it was yesterday, I know that I mentioned it, where we heard the story, the shocking story, actually, that 30% of the cameras along our border are not working. That comes out to 150 out of 500 cameras are not working. Now, what is even more shocking is that Alejandro Mayorkas was asked about these cameras in a congressional hearing back in April. This is what he was asked.
Today, I'm asking you, has this technology been operational since you took the post?
I would like to get back to you if there's any deficit in its operational capability. Senator, I'd be pleased to get back to you on that.
Has the system ever gone down under your tenure?
I'd be very pleased to provide you with that subsequent to this hearing.
Yeah. How can you tell how many gotaways you're reporting if you don't know when this technology is working or not working? In other words, how do we know that the 2 million known gotaways is a good number?
Senator, the individuals on the ground in U.S. Customs and Border Protection have visibility of the operational capability of the equipment they use. They oversee counting the number of individuals who evade detection to the best.
But you rely on technology to observe those as well, and you don't know if your technology is working or not working.
Senator, I believe I've answered the question.
He actually didn't answer the question. And so the thing that amazes me is Mayorkas, he's famous for showing up to these Senate hearings, congressional hearings, and if it's a question that he's uncomfortable with or that he doesn't want to answer, then he always says, well, let me get back to you on that. How the heck does Alejandro Mayorkas, as the head of DHS, does not know if all of the cameras are working? This is the guy that is supposed to be in charge of our southern border. yet he doesn't know. And the thing that really bothers me is he shows up knowing he's going to be asked these questions. So that was back in April. And now we find out in October that 30% of the cameras are not working on the border. Again, that's 150 of the cameras. Question number one, if you got out of that testimony, you went and you asked the Border Patrol how many of these cameras are working and how many of these are not. If they came back and they said, well, 150 of these cameras are not working, he didn't do anything about it. He was alerted to the problem back in April, yet he didn't do anything because here we are in October and you got 150 out of 500 busted. The Border Patrol has been trying to get these fixed for a while now. And again, you just heard the audio from Mayorkas that back in April, 6 months ago, he didn't do anything. He had no idea whether the cameras were working or not. Now, these cameras, as you can imagine, they're very important. Actually, yeah. Because there's blind spots. You see, we don't have as many Border Patrol agents as we need. We've got blind spots. And so what we do have is cameras that are dotted along the way so that you can keep an eye on the terrain and so forth. Well, if 30% of the cameras are down, if 150 of the cameras are down, then there's blind spots. You can't see who's coming over or where they're coming from. Julian Ainsley is with NBC News. She is a Homeland Security correspondent, and, well, she agrees.
Basically, the reason these cameras are so important is because when we talk to the administration about what they do to stop immigrants, if they don't, or spot immigrants or illegal drugs coming across the border, if they can't put a person at every spot, they always turn to these cameras and they say, look, Trump's wall isn't nearly as important as surveillance. And so the fact that there would have been this major outage, this is 150 out of 500, that meant something. I wanted to know, are there areas of the border that simply are invisible? And they said, yes, there are some very remote areas where they don't have people. If the camera goes down, they can't see who's coming across.
Well, exactly. I want you to think about all of the headlines that we've seen, not to belabor the point, but over the last couple of months, ISIS-affiliated radicals coming across our southern border, living here in America, fighting age males from every country that hates us, coming across our southern border. We've seen Americans killed across the country by illegal aliens. Entire apartment buildings are being taken over by these folks, the Venezuelan gang members, and our Border Patrol agents are flying blind at the border. Now we have a story, I don't know if you've seen this, but we have a story out of New York. 50% of the robberies in Times Square are being committed by 20 Venezuelan gang members. I'm going to repeat that. 50% of the robberies in Times Square are being committed by 20 Venezuelan gang members. Now, my question is, okay, if you know these gangbangers, then go arrest them. Kick them out of our country. Throw them in prison. If you know who they are. Now, the media will somehow try and blame Republicans for killing the bipartisan border deal, but here's the deal. The government gets taxpayer monies, right? The government gets our money. They get a big bucket of our money. How they spend that money, sadly, is up to them. They have spent $175 billion on Ukraine, $650 million settling these illegal aliens that are now robbing people in Times Square and raping and killing folks across the country. And so now the question is, why can't we spend the money and utilize the resources to get these cameras fixed?
It's actually the Federal Aviation Administration that is responsible for contracting the people to handle these cameras. So CBP turns to the FAA. FAA then has to go to their contractors to go out into the field and handle this. In fact, in that memo we obtained, CBP is thinking about trying to end their affiliation with FAA, try to get FAA to stop running these cameras so they can go directly to the contractors because they don't think they can handle the scale of what they need.
Awesome. So the FAA where it's their goal to utilize hiring practices that favor diversity, equity, and inclusion rather than competence. Remember that Senators Mike Lee, J.D. Vance, and Mike Braun have been looking into all of that. Remember all of those people who wanted to be air traffic controllers and their careers were destroyed because they didn't fit into the whole DEI strategy and policies of the FAA. And so once again, here we are looking at woke policies, and their priorities are all screwed up. And at the FAA, they're more worried about hiring within the diversity, equity, and inclusion guidelines and not fixing the damn cameras at the border. Do you know that in any other industry, that many broken cameras or broken equipment would be unacceptable and that people would be fired? Apparently, here in America, at our border wall, it is acceptable to be able to have that much dysfunction and that much equipment that doesn't work. It should be unacceptable. But apparently it is acceptable at our southern border within the Biden administration. And there might be people out there that'll say, but wait, Dan, what about the Trump administration? Were any of these cameras broken during the Trump administration? I have no idea. If somebody said, yeah, but during the Trump administration, we had, 25% of the cameras were broken and they were never fixed. Well, then somebody should have been fired for that. I don't take sides on these kinds of things. If it's a Trump screw up, then he needs to take care of it. If it's a Biden screw up, he needs to take care of it. Now, you have a lot of folks saying that Donald Trump, right, he killed the bipartisan border deal. Remember, we talked about this yesterday with Bill Clinton.
Trump killed the bill. The bill was being written by senior Republicans in the Senate, and he killed the bill. Why?
Why? Says Bill Clinton. Why? So remember in the Senate, right now, and back in May when this thing did fail, again, the bipartisan Senate border bill, immigration bill, whatever you want to call it. But when it failed, basically you had the Democrats with a very slight majority when you consider the independents voting with the Democrats in the Senate. And Kamala Harris, of course, if there's a tie, she is the tiebreaker. And so one of the things, and Mark Levin reminded us of this, is that at the time, and now, you had 5 Democrats who said that they would not be voting for the bill. 5. You had Elizabeth Warren, Ed Markey, Bernie Sanders, Hispanic Democratic Senators Alex Padilla, and Robert Menendez, Gold Bar Bob. Those 5 said that they would not vote for the bill. So conveniently, of course, that was forgotten by Bill Clinton.
Trump killed the bill. The bill was being written by senior Republicans in the Senate, and he killed the bill. Why?
Why? Why didn't you ask Elizabeth Warren? Why didn't you ask Ed Markey? Why didn't you ask Bernie Sanders? Why didn't you ask Alex Padilla and Robert Menendez? Democrats, 5 of them, who said that they would not be voting for the bill. So, of course, they're trying to blame Donald Trump for, air quoting here, killing the bill, when in reality, Republicans voted the way that Republicans are going to vote. But you also had 5 Democrats as well who said no thanks. Now, the reason, it's interesting. Both sides, right, the 5 Democrats who said that they would not vote for the bill had the same reason as Republicans for not voting for the bill, although differently. You had the Democrats who said, well, the bill doesn't go far enough in allowing as many illegal aliens into our country as possible. The Republicans also said, well, it doesn't go far enough. Although in the Republicans' case, it doesn't go far enough to protect our southern border. So for me, when you sit here and you listen to the folks on the left, when they say that Donald Trump destroyed that bill and Donald Trump convinced the Republicans to kill that bill, the reality is that there was a different bipartisan feeling on that bill, because they always like to say, oh, it was a bipartisan agreement. The reality is that there was also bipartisan agreement that the bill should not be passed. I'm just saying. So I don't know. Now the question is, I think if Brett Baer, if he was going to ask the question, maybe as he sits down with Kamala Harris, he asks her the question, okay, so as a member of the Biden administration, if you don't want to admit that you were border czar or whatever, but is the Biden administration and the person that's second in charge, can you explain to us why no one, even though the Border Patrol has been saying that you got 150 cameras out of 500 that are broken or not working, we've got all of these blind spots. So now we have absolutely no idea how many people in this country have come, how many people have come into this country because we can't see because of the blind spots. I wonder if Brett Baer will ask her about that question. Again, it all goes down to competency. Because again, competency does matter. It's not in the Biden administration. Do you know that I can't find one competent person within the Biden administration? I just can't. 866-90-RED-EYE is the phone number. 866-907-3339. Dan Mandis in for Gary and Eric. It's Red Eye Radio.
Get in touch with Red Eye Radio, toll free at 866-90-RED-EYE.
Red Eye Radio, 866-90-RED-EYE is the phone number, 866-90-RED-EYE. Coming up in the next hour, a couple of headlines. And this is really sad. Apparently, the Biden administration is now threatening to cut off arms supply to Israel. The strongest known warning sent to Benjamin Netanyahu since the war began. That's how the Daily Mail puts it. I would say that it's the strongest warning sent to Benjamin Netanyahu since they were attacked by Iranian-backed and funded terrorists. Details on that story and what are California cops saying about the Teslas that they now have to use because of Governor Gavin Newsom. Details straight ahead.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One. Now, it's Red Eye Radio. Talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios. For Gary McNamara and Eric Harley, Dan Mandis, this is Red Eye Radio.
866-90-RED-EYE is the phone number, 866-907-3339. Yes, indeed, in for Gary and Eric. I host a morning show in Nashville, Tennessee on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. You can find out more about me on Facebook. I'm also on Twitter at Dan Mandis Show. I host mornings, by the way, 6 to 10 Eastern, and you can find that wherever you stream. We're also, if you want to watch the radio show, you can. We're on Facebook. We're also on YouTube and at 997WTN.com. A couple of headlines for you just because I know that there's a lot going on. And here in Tennessee, where I live, it's a big day because early voting starts today. So my wife and I, because I've been preaching on the radio for a long time now, that we have got to, if you're a conservative, if you're a Republican, we got to vote early. That's the thing we need to do, is vote early. I did see this headline, so I'm going to go vote today. despite being on the air for 9 straight hours, I'm going to get out of here and I'm going to go vote. And this headline, Trump edges out Harris with early voters in battleground states. Now, just so you know, I don't take a lot of these stories real seriously because I know that things can literally change by the day. But here's what they say. Former President Donald Trump has a slight edge over Kamala Harris with early voters in battleground states. New polling shows a promising sign. The Republican in the highly competitive presidential race, the Harvard CAPS Harris poll found 48% of voters who said they would cast their ballots early in critical swing states picked Donald Trump. 47% sided with Kamala Harris. Another 5% of respondents said that they went with another choice or had not yet voted. Donald Trump's swing state strategy is paying off, says Mark Penn, co-director of the poll. Among all voters in the key swing states, Trump was up 2 points with 48% support for Harris's 46%, the survey shows. You know, I noticed that in the news last couple of days, but, you know, the Democrats were always talking about this, getting rid of the Electoral College. You got Tim Walz out there. He was anyway, I don't know if he still is, but talking about how we need to get rid of the Electoral College. So I saw a number of different folks out there, analysts and so forth, who are predicting that Kamala Harris will win the popular vote and Donald Trump will win the Electoral College. Now, what's going to happen is if Donald Trump does win and Kamala Harris wins the popular vote, then watch for the Democrats to just go bat crap crazy on that, because they will no doubt do what they do all the time, which is try to say, well, the election wasn't fair and all of these other things. You know, I really look forward to, if the Democrats do end up losing, I can't wait to see the reaction. I can't wait to see what Kamala Harris and the Democrat Party will do. You know, because let's not forget, and then I'm going to move on, but, you know, back in 2020, you had Joe Biden, and Joe Biden had 400 election attorneys ready to go if he lost. So for me, the more you hear about, you know, the Democrats, and they're always talking about the Republicans, they're always looking at Republicans and saying, will you accept the results of the election in 2024? And the perfect answer is, will you? Because that usually just shuts them right up. Because I think that we all know that they won't. And here's the other thing. And then I promise you I'm going to move on. But there seems to be this argument going on about 2020 and whether or not Donald Trump, you know, whether or not it was a peaceful transition of power. You know, one of the things that I would say, and I've done countless monologues on this, is that, yes, we had what happened on January 6th, where Donald Trump said, let's march peacefully and patriotically down to the Capitol and allow our voices to be heard, or whatever it was, and we all know what happened. Now, I firmly believe that Donald Trump did not inspire January 6th, but I'm not going to go down that road because, frankly, I'm bored of the conversation. But the Democrats and the media, they are always, always, always bringing that up. And, you know, one of the easy things to say, there's audio out there of, you know, the likes of Maxine Waters and all these other Democrats. Every time a Republican wins, they're calling for investigations. They're not willing to accept the votes, etc. But here's the difference, is that when Donald Trump was elected in 2016, and he takes the oath of office in early 2017, the Democrats attacked him at every turn. I mean, we all know about what happened with the Russian collusion investigation. We all know that they tried to impeach Donald Trump twice. In other words, Donald Trump did take the oath of office, and he did go into power, much to the dismay of the Democrats, but they made his life a living hell. And it went beyond politics. It went well beyond politics. We had, yes, the Mueller investigation where he was cleared of Russian collusion. We had the dirty dossier. We had that out there as well. They investigated him at every turn, and they made his life a living hell. So that's sort of the difference. And trust me when I say, I do understand that the Republicans returned fire when it was time for Joe Biden to go into office. And the Republicans, they investigated Hunter Biden. They had their investigation, so on and so forth. It's going to be interesting to see how everybody reacts to what happens here in 2024. A lot of people voting early, according to this article from The Hill, which was yesterday, by the way. Things could have changed today. But according to The Hill, Donald Trump is looking good so far because there was a movement. I saw an article somewhere. I don't even remember where I saw it, but I saw an article where it said that there's still a lot of Republicans that are out there saying, nope, I'm going to vote on Election Day. And I just get so frustrated with that because you need to vote early, and I'm not going to do the joke, you need to vote often. I'm not going to do that, although I usually do. But you really do need to vote early because the hijinks and shenanigans of the Democrat Party, I just don't trust them. You need to make sure that your vote counts. Headline from California. California cops who are trialing, they're trying out the Teslas ahead of a ban on gas vehicles say that they are nearly unusable. Well done, Gavin Newsom. Well done. I like when Donald Trump calls him Gavin Newsom because that is entirely appropriate. California cops who have trialed the Teslas ahead of the state's ban on gas and diesel vehicles have revealed they are nearly unusable for police departments. Governor Gavin Newsom mandated back in September of 2020 that all vehicles sold in California be zero emission by 2035. So you're going to have, the bad guys. This is just like guns, right? So when the Democrats like to argue about guns, they always talk about how there's got to be, Kamala Harris, a mandatory buyback program. She advocates for a mandatory buyback program. And so the Democrats are always trying to take the guns away from the good guys, and that means that the bad guys who don't follow the rules and they don't follow the laws, the good guys are going to be outgunned by the bad guys. Well, this is the same thing here. Gavin Newsom is saying that, the police officers have to use these, Teslas to chase around the bad guys, and the bad guys are going to have the really fast gas-guzzling cars. And so the good guys, the cops, are not going to be able to chase these guys down because they're going to be in their Teslas. Come on. How many different ways are the Democrats going to try to allow the bad guys to win? That's a legit question. They want to take the guns away from the good guys. They want to take the fast and sturdy cars away from the cops. Let's also not forget about the soft on crime policies in Democrat-run states all across this country. So how many different ways can the Democrats allow the bad guys to win? Let me count the ways because that's 3 right there. I get so frustrated and I get so tired of this. I can't wait to vote today. I think it'll be maybe cathartic to walk into that voting booth and vote, which is what I'm going to do here in Tennessee. Among the California police departments that have tried using the Teslas was the Ukiah. Is that Ukiah? I hope that's correct. The Ukiah Police Department, the largest municipal police force in Mendocino County. There, Police Chief Cedric Crook, great name for a cop, requested the city council approve the purchase of 2 Tesla Model 3S's, which is the company's sedan, on August 7th of 2024. That purchase totaled nearly $150,000 between the cost of the cars and $35,000 in modifications to make the Teslas patrol ready. He says the problem is, doesn't matter how much you modify them, they're just not good enough for police vehicles. He noted that police are often required to transport suspects, witnesses, or victims to trials and court dates, which could be far away. And if detectives were driving a Tesla, Crook said that they would have to spend time at an unsecured public charging station while protecting that person. I know that you're a serial killer and a serial rapist, and you're probably from Venezuela, but we've got to spend, an hour charging this car to get you to where you need to go. Can you imagine that? I mean, I don't want to go on and on about this, but the bottom line is that, these Teslas, they're just not appropriate for what the police need. They said if the city had only a Tesla fleet, incidents involving more than one suspect would require more cops to respond with more cars, putting a strain on the police department resources. This guy Crook also noted that he had heard from other officers, and they said that they were not able to comfortably get into and out of the driver's seat with their duty belt on because of the car's sleek design. So I do wonder, when Democrats make these insane proclamations, in the words of J.D. Vance, do you hear yourself? Do you think through the things that you want to do? Because oftentimes they help the bad guys, or they just don't make a lick of sense. And that's part of what is going on in California. So now the question is, does Gavin Newsom admit that he was wrong? By the way, do you know how much money has been spent in the current presidential election? Headline from the Daily Mail, a staggering $16 billion in donations have been spent on the 2024 election. They say this smashes the records, and yes, it is still too close to call. But here's the other thing that I would say about this. Not only is it $16 billion election and it's still too close to call, but, and I think I mentioned this last night as I was hosting on Red Eye Radio. Do you know the in-kind donations of the mainstream media? Because they have been so kind to Kamala Harris. They've been laughing, they've been hugging, they've been just getting along famously and covering her with kid gloves, yet they attack Donald Trump at every turn. So I'd be willing to bet that if you looked at how much money the glowing coverage, if you translated that into commercials, it's got to be in the millions of dollars. Because if you look at, the CNNs or the MSNBCs of the world, especially early on with CNN, they were very friendly to Kamala Harris. And they really did go after Donald Trump all the time. And then you look at the percentage of positive coverage of Donald Trump, which is minuscule, and positive coverage of Kamala Harris, which is, I think I saw something like 93, 94% of the time. And yet they are pretty much dead even. Do you know, I think the reason why Trump is doing so well is because he is out there on the campaign trail and he is talking to folks, and Kamala Harris simply is not. 866-90-RED-EYE, 866-907-3339. Dan Mandis in for Gary and Eric. This is Red Eye Radio.
Brought to you by Hot Shot Secret.
Hi, I'm Jen Loomis, a transport safety expert at J.J. Keller, and I'm here to share a tip on speed and space management. In order to manage speed, you need to understand the 4 factors involved in stopping a vehicle. Perception distance is the distance a vehicle travels from the time you see a hazard until your brain recognizes it. The perception time for an alert driver is approximately 3/4 of a second. Reaction distance is the distance a vehicle travels from the time your brain tells your foot to move from the accelerator until your foot hits the brake pedal. The average driver has a reaction time of 3/4 of a second. Brake lag distance also needs to be taken into account. When operating a vehicle with air brakes, it takes about half a second for the mechanical operation to take place. Finally, braking distance is the distance it takes a vehicle to stop once the brakes are applied. Braking distance is affected by the weight, length, and speed of the vehicle, as well as road condition. This tip was brought to you by J.J. Keller and Associates. Visit us at jjkeller.com.
Lines open for your calls. 866-90-RED-EYE on Red Eye Radio.
#866-90 Red Eye is the phone number. 866-907-3339. Dan Mandis in for Gary and Eric. This headline: U.S. is now threatening, the Biden administration is threatening to cut off arms supplies to Israel. Strongest known warning sent to Benjamin Netanyahu since the war began, calling for greater humanitarian aid in Gaza. You know, I do get frustrated. I'm such a huge supporter of Israel. I know that there's some folks that are not, and they're not fans of, you know, aid to Israel and so forth. And I do get that. But I think that the frustrating part for me is that whenever the media covers these kinds of stories about the need for humanitarian aid, and I do understand that, but it's because Hamas is using hospitals and schools and people as human shields. And they're burying their bombs, and they've got their tunnels and all that stuff underneath the hospitals and the schools. And so I do understand the concern for humanitarian aid, but, you know, Israel has to do what Israel has to do. And it's almost like as horrible as the terror attack against Israel was, and still is, of course, the further you get away from that, the fewer people seem to remember how horrible that day was and what happened to the women and what happened to the children. And I do understand that on the one hand, Kamala Harris will say, well, of course, I support Israel in their need to defend themselves, but how they do that matters. And so I would ask Kamala Harris, Brett Baer, if you're listening, I would invite you to ask the vice president this question. So how would you like to see Israel defend itself against Hamas and Hezbollah and Iran? Because it seems to me like Israel needs to do whatever they need to do to make sure that it doesn't happen again. So Kamala Harris, what would you suggest?
Red Eye Radio from the Uniden America Studios. Now, for Gary McNamara and Eric Harley, here is Dan Mandis.
866-90 Red Eye is the phone number. Appreciate you listening to Red Eye Radio. 866-907-3339. There is a lot going on. Big interview with Brett Baird tomorrow. I guess that'd be today. I always get days messed up when I host on Red Eye Radio. It's like yesterday in some parts of the country. It's tomorrow in other parts of whatever. Anyway, Brett Baird, big interview coming up on Fox News with Kamala Harris, and it should be really good if Brett Baird actually asks her the tough questions. You know, the Charlamagne interview that happened on yesterday, it was an absolute joke. At least to me, it was an absolute joke. No follow-up questions, really. And he didn't really press her on the biggest issues of the day. And one of the things that he asked her is, and I don't have the audio, but one of the things that he asked her is, you know, do you ever say anything new? And her point was, well, you know, these things are really important to me, and so repetition is important so that I can hammer the points home that Donald Trump is a fascist, right? But what's going on in America right now? Because remember, she's talking to Joe Rogan. She's about to do Brett Baier. She just did Charlamagne. And obviously, Charlamagne wants to help Kamala Harris. And I think that's part of the problem. It's like if you're, and I mean this for Trump too, if you're going into an interview and you think that that interviewer is there to help you and help your momentumless campaign, well, then it's not going to really be much of an interview. Now, the big question is, will Brett Baier actually do his job and go after Kamala Harris? Some people are saying that, and I don't buy this, but some people are saying that Brett Baier, him having Kamala on, is supposed to help her so that it'll help defeat Donald Trump because Fox News is anti-Donald Trump. And I get why Donald Trump says that, but here's what I want. I want a free and fair election, and I want as many people as possible to hear what Kamala Harris has to say about the decisions that were made during the Biden administration. But it's getting really nasty. Donald Trump has big-time momentum. You've got Kamala Harris, she definitely does not have a lot of momentum. And so Ian Sams, because there's a lot of lead up to these interviews, Ian Sams is with the Harris campaign, and he and others in Kamala's realm, in Kamala's camp, they're questioning Donald Trump's mental fitness.
I want to ask you about something you posted on social media that is related to this. You posted a side-eye emoji in response to Trump dropping out of a planned interview with CNBC, alluding again to Trump's mental fitness. Now, the vice president was invited to appear with them but declined. She also declined to be at that Bloomberg conversation, or to have a conversation with Bloomberg, I should say. She also declined an interview with Time Magazine. Declining media hits really isn't an indicator of mental fitness, is it?
Well, I think anybody who thinks that the vice president's dodging tough questions should tune in tomorrow when she sits down with Fox News for an interview. And so I think she's out there taking questions even from really tough corners. Today, his appearance at Bloomberg was the first event he has done in one entire month with a mainstream media outlet. Everything else has been in conservative media or friendly spaces.
All right, so number one, I don't really know if that's true, but for Ian Sams to say that, so all of a sudden, after Donald Trump has been on MSNBC, I'm not sure about CNN, probably CNN. Yeah, because he was with the nighttime host at CNN, whose name, of course, is escaping me. But he's on with MSNBC. He's on with CNN. Donald Trump will literally go anywhere. He's been trying to get on Joe Rogan for a long time. And Joe Rogan is no fan of Donald Trump. And so now you have both candidates trying to get onto Joe Rogan's podcast. And I would love to see Kamala Harris try and survive a 3-hour Joe Rogan podcast. If you don't know what that is, if you don't know who Joe Rogan is, he's I believe he's still the most popular podcaster in America. And I think he's a political free agent. He's just really curious about the truth and policy. And he said good things about Donald Trump. He said bad things about Donald Trump. He said good things about Kamala Harris, and he said bad things about Kamala Harris. But it is a strange flex from the Democrats and Donald and Kamala Harris's camp to say that suddenly, Donald Trump is not fit for office, or he's weak and he's unstable. It does seem to be a really strange tactic because, these same people were seemingly oblivious to the challenges of Joe Biden.
And here's the thing. It makes you wonder. Why does his staff want him to hide away? One must question. Are they afraid that people will see that he is too weak and unstable to lead America?
Yeah, she was. So she was doing the chin in the hand kind of thing. I was scrolling through X, and it came across, and I didn't pull the audio, but I came across a podcast, and they had a lot of followers, a couple of black guys, and they were talking about Kamala Harris, and I just, there is a tone, and there is sort of like a shrillness, and I'm sorry because I know that sounds terrible. Some people may accuse me of sounding sexist, but there is just this high-pitched tone that she has in that audio bite, and there's several that are out there where she's just got that high tone. And the guys on the podcast were saying, this election is feeling a lot like Hillary Clinton. Kamala Harris she's acting and she's sounding a lot like Hillary Clinton. And we know how that turned out. And I don't know what side of the political aisle these guys were on, because it was a real quick listen as I was blowing through a bunch of podcasts and stuff on X. And you can follow me on X at Dan Mandis Show. But listen, if Donald Trump, because people are going to say, well, if, you don't say that about a man, I would. If Donald Trump was out there screaming all the time, I would absolutely say that he might want to tone it down. But Harris, there's just something about, and other people have said it too, where there's something about that voice that men are not going to vote for that. I don't know about that. I know a lot of guys that are going to vote for Kamala Harris. I don't understand it, but whatever. To each his own. That's the difference between me and the average Democrat, is I can still, have a relationship with somebody who is on the other side of the aisle. Not true the other way around, sadly. But, Trump was just in Pennsylvania, I think it was the other day. He was in Coachella over the weekend. J.D. Vance has been everywhere. And so for Kamala Harris to do, the whole pondering emoji face and ask why they're trying to hide Donald Trump. Do you know what part of this is, I think? I think back to failed presidential campaigns of the past. And when you're 3 weeks out and you're clearly losing or have lost momentum, then what you try to do is you try to change the narrative. You try to say something new. And that's what she's trying to do. She's trying to say something new. And so I think it's obvious that for, anybody watching Kamala Harris, that she's beginning to panic. And the Democrats are beginning to panic. And yeah, I do know that it does sound cliche to say it at this point, but she did. She stood by, and Karine Jean-Pierre and all these people on the left stood by and watched in silence as Joe Biden began to deteriorate. They absolutely said nothing. So, you don't really have much to say here, I would say, to Kamala Harris regarding Donald Trump. I mean, you can, but the obvious answer is that is BS. And so she does. She has this new line of attack against Donald Trump.
His staff won't let him do a 60 Minutes interview. Every president for the last half century has done one, anyone who's running for president. Everyone has done it, except Donald Trump. He will not debate me again. I put out my medical records. He won't put out his medical records. And you have to ask, why is his staff doing that? And it may be because they think he's just not ready and unfit and unstable and should not have that level of transparency for the American people. There's a real choice in this election.
You know what she's doing, right? She's trying to bait Donald Trump. That's what she's trying to do. And whether or not you believe that Donald Trump should do another debate with Kamala Harris, I don't believe that he should. The reason I don't believe that he should do another debate, just don't do it, is because Kamala Harris is losing. Right now, Kamala Harris is losing. And I knew, and a lot of you folks probably knew as well, that when she suddenly started calling for that debate, when she goes down to the southern border and all the other things that she started doing that were sort of new, a couple of weeks ago, she started agreeing to do interviews. There was internal polling that was going to show and is showing that she was going to lose. And then lo and behold, here comes the polling following the internal polling that showed just that she's beginning to lose in the battleground states. But she hasn't really been tested. I mean, that 60 Minutes interview, it was close. It was close. But the problem I have with the 60 Minutes interview, obviously, is that even though the anchor, the reporter, I think Bill Whitaker, is that what it is? He asked really good questions. He even asked follow-up questions. But they edited that interview to make her look more concise and more confident. I went through that earlier in the week. But there's some people that are out there that are asking the question, why is Kamala Harris not working real hard? Is that a legit question? Why is Kamala Harris not working hard? That is a headline in Breitbart. Political experts are questioning Kamala Harris's closing strategy. Folks, we got 3 weeks. And I'm reasonably certain that Donald Trump is not sitting around doing, I don't know how long she sat there and spoke to Charlamagne, but from what I understand, that's all she did today. Donald Trump is out there flying from one interview to another interview to a border state, etc. Not a border state, a battleground state. It could be a border state, whatever. Vice President Kamala Harris's quiet schedule on Tuesday raising concerns about political experts who questioned her apparent lack of urgency with less than 3 weeks until Election Day. Harris has repeatedly said that she is running as an underdog, but her schedule does not appear to mirror those claims. Harris's Tuesday schedule shows literally one event. She will sit for an interview with Charlamagne at 5 Eastern, and I played you some audio from that less than hard-hitting interview. So she didn't do much today except that one interview, 3 weeks out. I mean, let me tell you something. If I'm running and it's neck and neck, I'm getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning. I'm doing morning show interviews. I'm flying to various battleground states. I'm doing everything I can to get my word out. And she's not. Trump has been hitting every town, every podcast, and every interview. What has she been doing? Nothing. And so now there's people that are beginning to question her effort. I love that. Mark Halperin, he's talking about this. Polling shows that Harris is losing support among men, black voters, Hispanic voters as well, while former President Donald Trump is running ahead of his 2020 and 2016 performances. And people are saying, okay, so where is she? And why is she not hitting the road like Donald Trump is? I've got some of the quotes from some of the analysts coming up next. The phone number is 866-90-RED-EYE, 866-907-3339. Dan Mandis here for Red Eye Radio.
Get in touch with Red Eye Radio, toll free at 866-90-RED-EYE.
Red Eye Radio, 866-90-RED-EYE, 866-907-3339. My name is Dan Mandis. I host a morning show in Nashville, Tennessee on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. During the break, I was sitting here listening to a couple of things. Number one, a guy named Mark Halperin, and he is, he's a journalist and that kind of a thing. He is talking about Donald Trump and the appeal of Trump to black males. I'm going to play some of that. Also, Tim Walz. Oh, my Lord. Have you heard what he said about being a gun owner? That is also straight ahead on Red Eye Radio.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One.